Hello and welcome to another episode of the 905er podcast with me, Rod Tanner.
I am Joel McLeod.
Halton Regional Council has just taken one of the most important votes it's likely to take this decade. At a meeting that went late into the evening last Wednesday, after the unusual sight of, at the regional level anyway, of over 50 delegates attending to give their opinions, the regional councillors from Burlington, Oakville, Halton Hills and Milton voted 15-9 in favour of a motion that will prevent the region updating its official plan to allow boundary expansion for further development. In doing so, Halton became the second council in recent months to vote against boundary expansion in the face of both provincial and industry pressure to open up more lands for development. Indeed, Halton followed Hamilton's lead in seeing a quickly established Stop Sprawl Halton movement, mirroring Hamilton's successful Stop Sprawl HamOnt campaign. It appears that the movement to end low-density sprawl in the 905 region has gained huge momentum in the last 4 years. So we wanted to speak to people on both sides of this debate to give their arguments for why the boundaries should expand or why they should stay the same. And to that end, we invited two councillors who took part in last week's vote to answer questions. In the first part of today's episode, we're speaking to Councillor Paul Sharman. Councillor Sharman has been a city and regional councillor for Burlington's Ward 5 since 2010, and in that role he's frequently served as the chair of city committees and boards, has worked to implement Burlington's net carbon neutral plan, as well as representing the interests of his ward. Prior to entering politics, Councillor Sharman had a successful career in the private sector as an organisation performance management consultant. Last week, Paul Sharman was among the 9 councillors, including the mayors of Halton Hills and Wilton, who voted in favour of urban boundary expansion. Then, joining us in the second part of today's episode, we're joined by Councillor Jane Fogal. Councillor Fogal has served her community in Halton Hills over 7 terms, dating back to 1997. She introduced the climate emergency declarations at Halton Hills and Halton Region and chairs multiple committees. She's been a core member of the Stop Sprawl Halton group and is co-chair of Halton Hills Climate Action. As one would expect from this biography, she voted with 14 other councillors last Wednesday to halt boundary expansion in Halton until 2041, albeit official plans can be reviewed every 5 years. Welcome to the podcast, Councillor Paul Sharman. Thanks so much for joining us today. So we invited you on to talk about the boundary expansion discussion that's just happened in Halton last week, and the vote actually happened last week, and the vote for the vote was not to expand, as I understand it, but obviously this was a fairly contentious issue, and there was a lot of debate about it, a huge number of delegates, and so on. And you voted against the way the vote eventually went, which was to allow for the expansion of the boundary, which is also the staff recommendation, I understand. Could you explain the kind of key points of the debate, what your perspective was, and what you think is going to happen now?
Yeah, it's a giant subject. We've been working on this for 3 or 4 years. The regional official plan amendments are probably the biggest piece of work the region does. And the outcome of it, for example, the previous official plan was a $6 billion spend on infrastructure for increased housing. This is a non-trivial matter, and it requires hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars of taxpayers' money, many years of work of professionals, thousands of pages of analysis, and it's thoroughly prepared in the context of law, in the context of planning professionals' experience and training, and in the context of guidance from the province as to what we are obliged to do. So this was not a trivial matter by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you go on the region's website, and you can find the Halton Regional Planning official plan, current official plan, and you'll be able to look at every report, every meeting, and watch it all. The last meeting we had, for example, actually February the 9th, we had a workshop. We had 2,777 pages of supporting data. And so this is, as I say, something that was very sophisticated, very complex, and required a lot of thought. Underlying this was the requirement for the region to grow by 450,000 people by 2051. The big question is why 2051? Some people say, how can you plan that far out? My background is I'm a strategic planner. I've worked with corporations for years and redesigned them. And my question would be, how can you not be thinking about the future when you're designing something as complex as a city? And how far out do you have to look? And what are the assumptions you have to make? And the assumptions you have to make are based on what you know about population growth and how they're going to be assigned within the region. And then what is required to build sewers, roads, and water supply. So there's the background to it. I have about 11 things, reasons why I voted the way I did, and I can go through those. But did you want me just to sort of do this as a monologue?
Top three. I was just like, what were the main what were the main points that you kind of focused on?
Yeah, they're on the top three. There are a series of them. Let me just give you I'll give you the Coles notes. The first thing is region staff followed provincial planning guidelines to the letter. The recommendations from staff were cast in concrete, were totally defensible, and any variation from that, the planning director said, was unrealistic. Okay, so keep that in mind. The land needs assessment, which is the underlying discussion around how much land was required to expand the urban boundaries, took a look at a very modest increase in the kind of housing that some newcomers may wish to buy, but it satisfied completely the planning instructions from the province. So these are no choices. You will do this. Now, add to that people saying that we could do more gentle densification, but the planners have already included that 80% of new residential units would be in densified form, right? In other words, they're saying 20% of it may be a little more relaxed so that the people who are complaining about what is going to happen, could happen, who live in giant homes, who live in lots of urban sprawl, could have their way, which is add no further housing like theirs. I'm not quite sure what that's about. Anyway, so there's the first 3 points, and it goes on from there. I think a critical one to think about is Milton and Halton Hills had already had council meetings that had their own staff do a thorough analysis of what they had to do in those towns in order to accommodate, in the case of Milton, over 100,000, 150,000 people moving in, Halton Hills a bunch less. And they had already deemed what they needed in order to build a complete community.
Well, that's an argument, though, Paul, isn't it? That I mean, that's somewhat of an ironic argument in some ways, and that you mentioned yourself that the province is dictating certain things, and the region often dictates things to the lower municipalities. Just because a municipality has decided something doesn't mean it's right, does it? I mean, that's not how things work.
Oh no, I think you misunderstand. This was done in the context of that plan. It was fully within the guidance of the province. So there's no dichotomy there. It was part of the process. What it meant was that clearly the lower tier municipalities, just like Burlington with moving its urban growth center, had the decision to make around how they wish to shape their communities. Right. So keep that in mind. They wanted, and they have to think about where they're going to put a hospital, for example, where they're going to put another few 100,000 jobs. They have to make that decision within the context of their plans, not somebody else. So so yes, the province says you must do this, but at the same time, you must tell us where you're going to do it, right? That's what those two councils did. So yes,
So coming
you
back
had a good
to,
question, and I accept it.
Yeah, coming back to so it means that, we have to put the arguments of the other side here. Obviously, we saw recently there was a vote in Hamilton, which went the same way. Basically, that there was a very strong campaign against urban expansion, and really, to an extent, this sort of there's certainly been a popular move toward against sprawl, which is, I think is something that I've certainly heard you argue in favour of before. And when we were having those same debates about, well, we need to put everything downtown, we need to put things in mobility hubs, we need to be putting it near transit. These very arguments that which again we'll hear coming from the province, and we've heard for years from councillors, are just what the anti-sprawl people are kind of advocating for now, isn't it? So isn't it? So, having said we need to put everything downtown, it's a bit contradictory to then say, well, let's expand the boundary and just let the sprawl carry on. How do you respond to those kind of points?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, how confused. Urban sprawl is kilometers of single-family homes on significant lots of land. That is urban sprawl. Densification is putting tall towers, mid to tall towers, on available land.
No, I mean, I understand that, but I was saying we've argued in favor of densification for years, and basically every political party, every level of government agrees that's the way to go. To then say we're going to expand the urban boundary so that there can be more single-family homes is contradictory, isn't it?
It depends on what you think they meant by single-family homes. You haven't read the reports. I have. That is not the intention. The intention is that it would be relatively more densified use than significant amount of land being sprawled with large homes and lots of land. This was never intended to be very large properties. This is intended to be townhomes and things like that, but making ground-oriented land available. We're talking about lots of apartments, and most of the people in Burlington do not live in apartments. They live in very large homes on large properties. That is urban sprawl. What is being proposed for Milton? By the way, 50% of it is for jobs. So here we are saying, well, it's all urban sprawl now. 50% is for jobs. 20% of the farmland is not used for farming right now. So you have to be careful about sound bites and very significant high-level goals, such as save the farmland, save the world. In general, I agree with. But the fact is, we at the same time have to deal with the kind of problems they had in New Zealand when people said, we don't want any more population. We certainly don't want Japanese people coming here. And that became a rallying cry. And it's xenophobic. It's completely unreasonable.
So do you think is population growth? You're saying that people halted are xenophobic, that this is at the root of everything?
No, I'm saying the people who are complaining about it are xenophobic. Their issue is about newcomers. They want to stop people coming to Canada and population growth because that's where it has to go. If those population come, we must accommodate them with housing. If we don't give them housing, we will have social strife.
People like Stop Sprawl Halton, do you think that they're being motivated by xenophobia?
I don't think they'd recognize that. I think they'd say it's solely climate change mitigation, and every acre counts. And in general, I understand the argument. I could easily say the same thing, except that you have to also consider all the other facets of the discussion, which they are not doing.
I just want to jump in. The overarching argument I'm getting from this is, protecting our green space, protecting farmland, and what, at least that's the argument being put forward by the other side at the moment. I honestly, I'm hearing what you're saying. It's a valid point, because we just heard from the federal government they want to admit over 1 million newcomers into Canada, and let's face it, this is a very desirable place to live. We've also had Mike Moffat on, who's talked about the fact that we've had all these newcomers come in, but we haven't built places for them to live, which has led to rising housing prices. I guess the question I would have under that argument is, when does this stop? Because we say we do expand, we allow Milton and Halton Hills to expand their boundaries, and we build denser locations. 2054 comes. Are we right back where we started now, and we talk about let's expand another few kilometers outward? And and it's I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to this, but it's a genuine question of like, when do we just say, okay, this is it. We can't grow any further past the boundaries. We need to start looking at more densification inside our communities to protect the green belt.
I think it's a great question. The central to planning in the province is, in fact, to stop urban sprawl. It's not an afterthought. It's not secondary. It is central to the numbers that they've allocated to Halton. It's central to the directions they've given to Halton to have 50% urban density throughout Halton within the urban boundary. So to answer your question about when this stops, the answer is it never will stop until we no longer see people wanting to move to Canada, and we no longer see population growth. We are one of the most underpopulated countries on earth. If you live anywhere where there is strife, hunger, and generally a poor quality of life, every single one of those people will be looking into Canada and say, "I want to live there." And borders are porous; they will be coming. But on top of that, we have an economic problem here in Canada, and that is the miracle of aging. When Medicaid was introduced into Canada in the 1950s, the average lifespan was 52 years. Today, it's 82 years old. And that means that we have presently a massive aging of the population. And people are still retiring fairly young relative to that age, which means somebody's got to feed us. Somebody's got to pay those pensions. There are more people over the age of 65 today than there are under the age of 15 in Canada. Where's that workforce coming? It's coming from immigration. So yes, the feds are putting up the immigration to 400,000 a year. The plan we have that we're looking at today was based on 200,000 a year. This will continue until it stops, and it won't be night to 2054. It'll be 2031.
So I think,
and every 5 years
that leads to really. I mean, we just got a couple more minutes here, but to my next question, really, which is, what happens next? I mean, the region has obviously voted how it's voted now. That's over. However, certainly,
no, it's not.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
There was a motion to review the plan.
Okay, yeah.
There will be a vote.
The decision that was actually made on Wednesday was basically to defer a decision and to do more work, or
no, it was to do more work, and to consider how we could defer the decision to not expand the boundaries till after we've done certain further studies. It remains to be seen. The region staff will put together that plan. There will be a vote on the plan that we will submit to the province, and the province are the people who will approve it. My bet is because there was a letter from the mayor of Milton to the province saying he disagreed totally with what was happening at the region, that he argued strongly as to why they needed the urban boundary expansion, that the province will listen to him.
And they have the power to do that ultimately.
They have the power, and they can do that. And what is being proposed is inconsistent with the instructions the region was given. The preferred growth concept is consistent with the instructions they were given. So the answer is we'll find out, but it'll be after the election of the federal of the provincial government, and it'll be what it is. So that's the way it'll go.
Well, I think that probably that's all we've got time for today. But thank you again, Councillor Sharman, so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens next.
Me too. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome, Councillor Jane Fogal, to the 905 podcast. Thanks so much for making time today to provide your side and the side of the Stop Sprawl Halton organisation on the vote that happened last week at Halton Region on whether to expand the urban boundary or not. And again, as we mentioned earlier with our interview of Councillor Sharman, the vote was, for the moment, not to expand that boundary. And I'm wondering if you could, just to kick us off here, to sort of give the Stop Sprawl Halton's perspective on this, and why you're taking your that side of the argument, and what you think will happen next.
Well, thanks for inviting me to be here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak more directly to the public. We don't always get that chance.
That's why we're here. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. And, Stop Sprawl Halton is a group of people that don't know each other. They're not part of anything other than that they are residents who have a concern about climate change and about the conversion of prime agricultural land to urban uses. Stop Sprawl Halton started just with signs, lawn signs that were put out that said, "Save the farms." And this resonated with a lot of people. And gradually, more people sort of signed up for the newsletter and signed more for signs. And eventually, they began to write letters to their councillors and express their points of view. And the point of view is that we are in a climate emergency. This planning horizon goes from 2031 to 2051. We're actually supposed to be at net zero by 2031, the start of this plan. And we fully expect that things are going to get worse before they get better, that we need to use every tool in the toolbox we have to fight climate change. And as Dr. Diane Sachs said, and she's the former Environmental Commissioner for Ontario, we had her at Halton Region to talk to our staff. We had her also at Halton Hills, the town of Halton Hills, to talk to our staff. And she said the most important tool municipalities have in their toolbox is land use planning. And that by planning for sprawl, we're locking in emissions. We're making it so that people need to drive places to get all their services, because we've been segregating people into these vast swaths of largely single family homes. But the entire design of our communities is based on the car. And the biggest source of greenhouse gases right now is from transportation. So it's vital that going forward, we look at this. How do we make our communities better in terms of greenhouse gases? And at the same time, as it turns out, we can make our communities better on a lot of other levels as well. And of course, we're saving the farmland. We can see that farming is getting increasingly precarious around the world. And so the need to produce food is only going to go up with population, and yet it's becoming more precarious. It's less predictable weather. So we right here in the GTA have the best farmland in the country based on the quality of the soil and the environment that we live in, the heat units that we have, for example, or the amount of rain that falls and when we expect it. It makes sense to save it all. So that's our point of view.
I wanted to touch on that note. I thought it was a good point to ask my question on. You're a councillor in the town of Halton Hills, and the other town in Halton that voted in favor was primarily Milton. Both are the rural municipalities of Halton Region. Let's say in both councils, the majority of the councillors on those two city councils voted to essentially in favor of boundary expansion. I'm curious to get your perspective on that that juxtaposition of the fact that the municipalities in Halton that have the most farmland to preserve, essentially, are the councils were wanting to further expand the boundary. And maybe just to give us your comment on that perspective there.
Yeah, I can't speak for how it rolled out in Milton, but I can say that from my observation of how information was fed to councillors in the town of Halton Hills, that they made their decision with no public input to speak of. It was very interesting to try and get the town's planner to present the community's input. I couldn't seem to get there. The answer I got was, well, this is a regional project and they're doing the public input. Well, good enough, but can't you feed it to the local councillors? Like it exists out there. Give it to them. But it didn't happen. And this is the biggest decision we made in this term, maybe in all my terms, I don't know. And we pride ourselves all the time on public input, on all our decisions. And it's really super important for everything. And yet here we are with the biggest decision going, and there's no input really to speak of.
It's fair to say
Stop Sprawl Halton sent some people as delegations, but they were dismissed.
And it's fair to say that, I mean, in Halton, this was basically the same process was kind of a multi-year campaign. And in Halton, it's only in really the last couple of months, almost since the Hamilton vote, that this has become in any way kind of prominent in the public consciousness, I think it'd be fair to say. And that's really a problem with how the region works. I mean, obviously you have a lot more experience than I do, but regional issues tend not to get much attention. Is that a fair comment? Do you find, sort of comparing your municipal role at the lower level and the higher level?
Yes, I would say generally that's true. People identify with their own municipality and they pay more attention to it. And, the regional decisions largely are, okay, well, they're going to expand a road, or it's a public health thing. They've been paying attention to the masking bylaw, but
Yeah.
For most of the things that the region does, they're not too exciting. Like, garbage pickup isn't too exciting.
Yeah.
And even official plans, people, if they talk about the region's official plan, a lot of people have no idea what that means on the ground in their own town and city. They just don't know. Should I pay attention to that? I don't know.
It's it's an ongoing problem, I guess, and almost a separate issue. But I mean, to take some of Councillor Sharman's points that he made this morning, I think it'd be fair to sort of sum up his perspective as being, well, we need more homes, and albeit yes, I support intensification and increased density across Halton. Ultimately, that's not going to be enough for the the numbers of people who are going to want to live here in the years ahead. So we're going to have to open up a moderate amount of more space to let people live in. How do you counter that? I mean, because I guess the Stop Sprawl perspective is more of a, it doesn't matter how many people come, they have to live within the boundaries that we have. Is that a reasonable perspective to think we can fit everybody in to the kind of area that we already have?
Well, you have to remember to start with that the staff have acknowledged that we have enough land to accommodate all the growth to 2041 right now. It's just sitting out there empty, waiting. I think Milton has 5,000 acres. We've probably got 1,500 in Halton Hills. And we're saying, let's look at that land and do a different plan on it. Let's look at it comprehensively, especially given that our experience is we do a plan on a new part of the land that we're bringing in, and it has low density. And then the developers come back and apply to put more density in. This is a normal course of events. So instead of just letting it be redesigned by the developer, why doesn't the municipality get in there now and look at how much more efficiently we could use this land? And let's plan it as much more medium density with mixed use, and try to create those communities that are actually walkable to get the services and to get to the schools and so on. We know it can be done. It's being done in Europe when they add on a portion of land to their cities. The municipality says, we want to design this as a complete community that isn't car dependent. We're not going to start with the car. We're going to start with the people. Let's start with the people, putting them near the services. I mean, we have a great opportunity to do a much better job. I'm getting thank you notes from people that say, I moved out here to suburbia from the city, and I miss not being able to walk. I miss where we could walk to services to get our bread or our lawyer or whatever it is that we wanted, or to get to school. And now we don't have that. And we want to go back to that because they were better communities all around and much healthier. So there is room.
It does seem that, obviously, public opinion, I think, is fairly clearly. Public opinion appears clearly against sprawl these days, and that's a new development for our region, which was sort of sprawl central for decades. I mean, that's how Halton grew.
I would look at it and say, I think people are sick and tired of driving. As much as this is my editorial opinion, I suppose, but if you think about it, whether you live in Halton Hills or Burlington or Oakville, how much time do you spend in your car driving to work? If you're driving into Toronto or Mississauga or Brampton to go to your 9-to-5 job, how much time are you spending on the 401 or on the QEW, bumper to bumper traffic, going back and forth from work? And like at a certain point, you gotta say, like, yeah, I would like to have all my, and then then you're supposed to get in your car to go drive to your groceries or drive to your necessities of life, and you got to sit there and say, after a certain point, people just say, I'm kind of tired of always getting into my car to go somewhere. I wouldn't mind walking somewhere to pick things up. That's what my thoughts on the matter. But I guess to you, Councillor Fogal, is that Halton Hills is kind of in a unique position because you still are categorized as a town, and yet you're on the doorstep of Brampton. You're in next door to Milton, which is rapidly growing, and you yourself are growing. How do you envision Halton Hills' future? Is it still keeping that small town vibe, or are you looking at we have to adapt and change to a new future?
Well, what I have always heard all the time I've been growing up in Georgetown is we don't want to be like Brampton. And anybody listening to this in Georgetown knows that's been the mantra. But they want to keep it as a small town. But we're not even scheduled to get that big, and we can contain it in a way that spreads it out and allows us. We don't have any public transit at all right now, and we're nowhere near the densities that are required to make it efficient. But our businesses are asking for us to provide that transit because there are people that are having more and more trouble affording to live here. And so by adding gentle density into existing neighborhoods is going to be the key to what we do. And it happens very slowly over time, remembering that this plan is 2031 to 2051. And that we do have the land out to 2041 anyway. It's 20 more years. But why wait 20 years? We shouldn't do that. We should start adding the gentle density and permitting it to try and make it happen in our existing neighborhoods as well, so that we will be able to provide alternate forms of transportation and have the affordable housing so people who work here can actually live here. We're kind of solving a number of things.
It's crazy. I mean, it seems crazy to me anyway that we still, Halton region is so close. We're very closely allied. Each of the cities, each of the towns, we're very familiar with each other. But it has no, if you want to get from Burlington to Milton on public transit, good luck. You simply can't in any realistic sort of fashion. Should there be a regional transit, do you think? Like, rather than having each city have its own transit system, it seems like it would be a much better idea to do the whole thing centrally and maybe connect up each of the municipalities.
I think as we mature, that's going to come. Even Halton Hills, that doesn't have any transit right now, is probably within the next year going to have a line going across Steeles, joining Brampton, Mississauga to Milton, even though it doesn't, in the first go, come up to Georgetown, where the population is. But it's bit by bit, you end up with something that's more coherent, and it will become obvious to me that we want to pay to a single system and just coordinate the whole thing. I think that will come in time.
And it's one other point I should make that Councillor Sharman made, and as you may know, he can be quite he states his opinions fairly clearly, and he suggested that basically the reason why people don't want to expand urban boundaries is because of xenophobia. How do you respond to an accusation like that?
I think it's completely the opposite. That what we're looking at is not building single-family dwellings out. That who can afford that? Look at who can afford the single-family dwelling. It's what we're looking at is adding more density in housing forms that are more affordable, that will allow anybody to move here. That's what we're looking for. We welcome them.
I think that's probably a good place to end it. Really appreciate you joining us today, Councillor Fogal. And I guess actually I am going to ask one final question, and that is, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, the Halton has made a decision. I mean, it's not, as I understand it, it's not entirely a final decision, but a kind of working decision, if you like, and correct me if I'm wrong. And ultimately, everything is kind of dependent on the provincial government. Do you think that Halton will get its way, that the vote that's happened last Wednesday will actually be what happens?
Well, certainly the decision at Halton last week will that plan will get approved. The same people will vote for it. And we don't have time to do another plan if we want to be compliant. But, Hamilton made this decision in November, and everybody said, oh, that'll never work. The province will come down and they'll do something terrible. Well, it hasn't happened. It has, you get these threats, but our intention is to comply with every element of the growth plan. So what case do they have? So no, I don't think anybody is going to come after us.
Well, that's I'm certainly a fan of the municipalities' votes being respected by the province. So in that case, let's hope that's how that turns out. Again, thank you so much, Councillor Fogal. We really appreciate you making time at short notice, and indeed, we're recording this on a holiday. So we really thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity, as I said at the beginning, to sort of add some more context.
That's great. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.